fake nerds. I have been longing to talk with everybody about 3,000 years of longing, and I'm of course joined by Ryan Eliopoulos. For those keeping track, this is the first video where we filmed, and we're back in the same location. We did it!
We moved.
Life's
happening. Welcome. Yes.
Things happen.
It's George Miller time, baby.
Woo! Miller time! And of course, we're also joined by Brandon T. McClure.
Yes, not in the same location.
And we are, for this review special, not joined by Ben Magnet because he saw this movie and he said, neat. And that's all he had to say about it. So we're here to have this discussion without him.
Hey, at least he saw it.
That's true.
Appreciate that.
We were supposed to do this as a review on the show, but could not make that work. So doing it as a review special now.
Yeah, for all kinds of reasons. And I also saw it a couple days ago. So my knowledge is going to be very fresh.
I saw it weeks ago, so mine isn't as fresh.
I also saw it weeks ago.
I think let's just get into just some first impressions overall about the film. I will let you two go first.
I really liked it. I had a really good time. I remember leaving the theater not liking the ending, and having thought about it, and now it's weeks have gone by, I don't even remember what the ending is, so it's probably indicative of how I still feel about it. But 9/10 of the movie I really enjoyed.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm intrigued to get into that.
Again, it's been weeks, so like
no.
you could,
Yeah, but
change my mind.
I'm ready to get into that. Okay, Brandon.
I feel that the first 2/3 are very well directed, imaginative, beautiful, wonderful, just such a great experience. And then it really dropped off for me.
Yeah.
And I just felt cold by the ending.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'll word it this way. I agree mostly with what Brandon's saying. Something in the third act didn't quite hit for me.
Yeah.
However, the ending did make the third act work for me.
Yeah.
Once I got to the end, the third act retroactively worked for me. Which is what I'll say is so because by the ending, what it is that he stopped being there. He was released with the last wish.
Yep.
And he's allowed to be free.
With
if you haven't seen this movie, we're about to spoil it. Like we don't really do summaries, so like if you haven't seen this, you're gonna be lost.
This is also not a movie to like watch a review if you haven't seen it. It's kind of
really not.
It's not the movie for that. You go see this movie.
So anyway, when you get to the end, it's the third wish that releases him, where she says, "I just want you to be where you belong, wherever that may be,
with your peoples."
And that gives him ultimate freedom. And then we catch up 3 years later, and she's writing her own story about him and everything. And she's walking through a park, and then he shows up, and she details that like he would come back every once in a while and always stay longer than he should because she would always make him go away. And the whole thing is that like what made this work for me was the concept of the electromagnetic waves.
Yeah.
The concept of the world became too technological that it disrupted the magic of his own existence.
Yes.
And that what worked for me is the beauty of when he was free, he still came back and would push it right up to the limit and then go away, and recover and then come back and do that all again.
Yeah.
And that made it work for me because for a moment I thought we were heading for 3 years later. She writes the story. She's found some kind of inner peace through it, walks through the park, just thinks fondly of him, and that's the end of it.
Yeah.
Or you get some like light detail of like for a moment there, like before he shows up, we see, which I think they do really well, the particles of his existence.
I love that,
you see the particles around her before he starts walking up the hill.
Yeah.
But the fact that like she elaborates on specifically that he returns and he always stays longer than he should, even though she says that she begs for him to go. He always stays like right up to the last moment that he can possibly stand it. The kind of beauty and tragedy of the concept of her wanting the like recognizing that she's always wanted this love, this power of longing and investment in another person that he describes in the story. This is something she's always wanted and she wishes for it, but in wishing for it, she's kind of created an oxymoron where like that love can't be real, but he's also punishing himself and in releasing him is fully embraced by it at the same time. What didn't work for me about the third act was like
real quick, everything you just said, I do agree with. I think a lot of the love stuff totally works. It's the final I didn't, man. All of that is true. I still don't feel the execution of the end for me. Like, you're giving me more than the movie gave me with your explanation of it. You know what I mean?
Her final narration and that worked for me.
Yeah.
What something in the time in London didn't.
Yeah.
And like, that's the point. Like, everything from the moment where she finds him and his body is being destroyed by the waves because he can't take it, because he exists on the same frequency. Everything about that worked for me, and the forcing of like the separation and her making the wish for him to be happy, and then them coming back, that whole bit worked. It's that interim time in London that like feels clunky. Is I guess the word.
Again, because it's been a while. Is this the time in London when they are together?
Yes.
Yeah, I specifically remember.
But the ending does work for me.
Okay. Yeah.
But that third act stuff in London, that's where I agree with Brandon, where I'm like, something here doesn't feel as
cohesive.
Yeah, I guess cohesive is the word. Doesn't feel as fluid as what led up to that.
Yeah.
I'm going to split the difference and agree with both of you, because Sparkz, I'm with you. I also caught a lot of that. I was also happy with a lot of that. What you're saying about the ending of when he's first found, and then and he's turning to dust, and and all that. But by that point, I had become disinterested in the movie, because all the stuff in London was just not working for me at all. And so at that point, like, as much as I enjoyed kind of where that was heading, where that was what George Miller was saying in those moments, I very much was already checked out, and I wasn't receptive to what it was doing.
Yeah, I definitely think the first 2/3 of the movie are almost impeccable. Like, honestly, like, I love, and you'll get this. There are not many movies that I get to say this about that just gives me the Fall vibes, where it's a story about telling stories. And there are not many movies where that is the central premise of storytellers talking about stories. So that alone, I was totally enraptured with the idea of it. And it's about this Jin telling his life story of how he became and how he's ended up here. All of those different vignettes I love so much. It's just like, once we get to them in modern day living together, it's like, it doesn't feel as magical. Like, it almost becomes almost more like traditional, like, drama almost.
Well, what I think,
like, magical.
What I think what George Miller is doing is he's trying to right, we're getting all these love stories with the Jin earlier on, and now it's time for her love story with the Jin, right? It's time for her story, and so essentially it is still telling a story within a story. It is just now we're kind of in real time with it rather than being told it. But her story, by just the nature of who she isn't as interesting as those earlier stories. And so, like, I don't mean to say that they should have, like, fluffed it up a bit, but maybe they should have. I don't really know.
I see what you mean.
At that point, I just wasn't really into it.
100%, because we're going from, like, like, we're in the Middle East, we're dealing with, like, castles and kingdoms, and then we're just like, now we're just, like, with this girl in London, and, like, again, that sounds like it's a negative, but, like, they don't do anything for me to elevate their relationship out of everything else we've seen. It feels like it, like, becomes smaller and, like, less of, like, the big, like, surreal magical thing I've just been watching. You know what I mean? I think like, the problem isn't so much that, like, oh, it's in London, or, like, it's smaller scale or anything. The thing is that, like, it's a lot of time. It is a decent chunk of the film. It's a solid 15 minutes. And there's no conflict because everything is good. They are in a peaceful, functional relationship. Yeah.
There is no issue. You do feel like in some way, like, the other shoe is going to drop at some point, but you don't know what that is because there's no lead up.
But it's a movie.
Just
so
one day she comes home and then he's turning very very ashy and dusty.
Made a fight.
And I think that's really what it is that you're seeing things in the most, like, perfect perspective, but there's no clear indication of, like, what it's going towards. Because,
like, we've got to the point in the story where, like, this is like we were getting to here, and I don't feel like we're furthering it.
If there is no conflict or other thing coming here, then this is the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Which more than once in that time period, I thought, is this the end of the
There's
movie?
a one point strictly where it just cuts to black, and I'm like, that's a weird way to end the movie, and then it keeps going. I remember that specifically.
That's the
It might have been the 3 years later.
That's the 3 years later, I think.
I would have been.
But there's the moment where she goes to the neighbors and offers them the food, and he comes up behind them, and she's like, he'll be staying with me for a while. And I thought that was going to be the end of the movie.
Yes.
Because it was like this sense of like, I can do electromagnetic waves for you. She's more at peace because of his presence. She decides to be a nicer person. They're happy. We're going to do the story around.
It would have been a nice way to end.
But that's not it. Yeah. Then we continue on with her being successful at her job, him exploring the world when she's away, them having a conversation about humans and jinn and the world as it relates to him, which I actually think is a very good conversation, because it's in that bit where we get like the elaboration of him saying that there's no, he starts to recognize that there can be no need for jinn. There's nothing special about them in a world where the things that you do with technology exist.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a good concept. It's just, I think that there's no, again, you get this sense that the movie's not done, but you don't know why the movie isn't done.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right about that. And when I think back watching that movie and that conversation, which I do like, there's like nuggets within the ending that I do like. It does feel like the bit in the beginning with the jinn watching her performance, watching her speech at the college. It was a college, right?
Yes.
The jinn who's watching it and gives her that scare, that never comes to anything. And I thought at that point, by the time we get to the end of the movie, that would have come to something like jinn. The jinn are fighting for relevance, for existence, and they're losing.
You're jumping. Good point. You're jumping to my main negative, because I kind of let the third act stuff slide because I really did like the conclusion.
Oh yeah, you're talking about like the weird mouth guy.
Yes,
that wasn't involved in it.
Yes, I talked to Megan about it after, and I'm like, my main problem with the movie is that the person who the magic being that tries to steer her cart in another direction, I don't know what that was. And then the guy sitting in the lecture hall, as you said, who we specifically see
in one of the flashbacks
in the very first one, the story of Sheba, he's there.
Yeah.
And the connective tissue of that is not given. And Megan has a good theory. She said that she believes that what they're trying to say is that Tilda Swinton's character is long descended from jinn.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's partially in her, and one of the reasons she can connect to him is because she is like very, 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 very far down the line descended from jinn.
They don't give us any of that,
and that's why she could see those things.
Do they give us that in the movie?
Well, if this is the only read she could make of those earlier pieces, why are those things happening? It's because why could she kind of sense that she should pick the bottle she did that had the jinn in it?
Why did she created a person, and when she was younger, she has this overactive imagination.
And they do say through the stories, yes, like with the creation of Enzo, that feels like a jinn thing. And they do, and the way that they talk about characters in the stories that he's recounting about people who are descended from jinn and what they could feel and what they could affect, it does feel like there is supposed to be a subtext of she is descended from jinn.
Okay, that's cool.
But I agree with Brandon that those two specific appearances are not made clear enough to that being the indication. Like, all it would take is a line from Elba saying, like, I feel like you are somehow descended from jinn, or whatever.
Or closer,
whatever. Or like him making that discovery about her or something. But like, because that's never given, those things do feel kind of weird. Especially the one when she arrives at the airport really throws me, mostly because I have no idea what that character said. But they say something about like, he's coming this way or something like that, and they're trying to steer her a different way. And I'm like, why? What was that? Like, it's very unclear, like, to what purpose that was. It kept me in the London sequence feeling like there was some alternate force that had wanted to keep them apart.
Yeah.
And I was waiting for that
or bring them together.
And I was waiting for that shoe to drop, and it never happened. So that was very perplexing to me as well.
Yeah.
I think Megan's probably right. I do think there is supposed to be some kind of subtext that she is descended from jinn.
That makes sense.
There are enough nuggets, I think, in both the story she hears and the story she recounts to suggest that that's possible. But it's it's very deep subtext if it's there.
Right.
I really, really do like everything up until like we're just in the modern day. Like I just, and it's gonna sound like really mean, but like Tilda Swinton, incredible actor. I love her in this movie. I was so much more invested in the movie when I was like in the past. And like I love seeing them interact and I love their relationship, but it was so cool to see it. How did this djinn get here from thousands of years ago? And like every little bottle transfer and relationship he went through, what felt so real and so good. And I feel like we lose so much of that once we get to the modern day stuff, and it's like it's gone.
I was talking to Zara about it actually in the movie when we were watching the movie, and I said, you know what, this would have made an excellent TV show.
Sure.
Like I felt like if something like this, George Miller had like the ability to go just crazy with a TV show, however long he wants it to be, and each one are these stories of the djinn in the past, in the far past, in the near past, whatever, and like that's what the show would be. I think it would be incredible. Mm-hmm. That said, I love every single time we go to the past is just something I'm so engaged with. I'm loving seeing all the imagination. I wanted so much more of it, because there's like the dude that had like the spider head who's just like, and then he was the da-da-da of the thing. And I was just like, wait, can we go back?
He was a follower of Ifrit.
Yeah, Ifrit, and then like demons are there. And I'm like, what kind of world do we live in this world?
Can we go back and like expand on that? Because like I love seeing George Miller's imagination just go crazy in these sequences with throwing nonsense at the wall and having it be something completely normal with this world. And it was beautiful, beautiful stuff. And I wanted so much more.
And even though this, it's weird because like this is like, it feels like a low budget movie because it's just about people talking to each other, but it's really about djinn and like how he's like dying and like his particles and stuff. And like the special effects in this movie are awesome.
They are.
Like anytime Idris Elba is on screen, he's like partially dissolving, and it always looks so cool. He always looks so cool when he's big buck man. It's like
the musical instrument that was a cane.
Solomon.
Yes.
That Solomon plays, it was so cool, and I could have watched that for 30 minutes.
Yeah, super cool. I will push back a little bit on the concept of the TV show, mostly just because I think the visual storytelling in this movie, even in the third act, but in general, is just so damn good. And there's no TV show that ever would have let George Miller do this. And it's not a budget thing; it's time. Mm-hmm. He thought about every frame of this movie. It's very clear. It's very clear from the outset when you have the shot where she's coming down in the airplane, and it's the three wheels on the airplane landing, and it transfers to the three wheels of her cart going through the airport. And I'm like, he thought about every single shot in this movie. And the visual storytelling and the stories that the djinn are telling are executed so well that like without Elba's narration, and sometimes it is without Elba's narration, you can follow what's going on and you're connected to it and you're emotionally invested in it because it's just being so well told visually, let alone with the narration.
Yeah.
And there's just no world where a TV show gets made that good.
No, I am only speaking in the hypothetical that it would be made as good. And it's not, I realize it's impossible. It's just kind of the thing. It comes from my desire to explore these past narrations in so much more detail, to kind of get those, to just kind of live there for a bit, to watch George Miller just kind of like go crazy with these imaginative visuals and crazy stories that he wants to, that he tells us in these. I wanted more of that. That's the only place that's where the TV show desire in me comes from.
Oh yeah.
No, I understand. I only said my point to it to accentuate the really well done visuals of the film. This is maybe one of my favorite Elba performances ever. Probably only right under Knuckles. No, really, I think this might be one of Elba's best performances.
Yeah, he rules.
I think it's just so rich.
There's a sadness. There's a sadness to him that is he always has in the background of every line of dialogue he has, and it just creates such a more rich performance.
There is such a again, even with like the third act's drawbacks, the part where she tells him that he should just go because she screwed them over. She used the wish wrong. And he says, "You don't believe I love you." And the kind of real pain that he feels in it is deep. I will say that like the turn to her making the wish she made was just a little abrupt for me. But I think that also comes from a place where...
Which one? The one where she's like, fall in love with me?
The very first one, yeah. But I think it also... I think it does work if you can invest in her investment in the stories and what he's saying. And I do think Swinton has a really good chemistry with him. And I think it works. I think it really does work. There's a part of me that would have been perfectly fine with the film to end on after she's made that first wish and they're cosmically shown to be wrapped up in each other in the room, and it zooms in.
There are
you could have told me that was the end of the movie, and I would have been happy. I would have been happy with
several
what I
moments got. Where I'm like, oh, this is where we end the movie. And then they keep going.
But I do like. I do really like the final note of it. This concept of concept of like Jinn are fire, humans are dust, and the compatibility between them was such a good elemental take to bring to this story that just made it. It's like the whole thing revolves around that concept essentially, and I think that really does land.
Yeah, once they mention like the electromagnetic wave thing multiple times, I'm like, oh damn, they're like really going. That's like a real plot point of the movie. That's awesome.
And they do the one part in like the third chapter, and then she reiterates it when she's writing the book. But like they talk about when it's the third story, and it's when he first comes out of the bottle for Zephyra. He comes out. And it says stage 1 is electromagnetic waves. So all Jinn start at electromagnetic waves, and then it goes to the next piece, and then organs and all that. But they start as also super cool visualization of every time he comes out of the bottle, like the different versions. Both the first one with Swinton, where you see his giant foot coming through the door, and the way that they do, just the way they do like the shadowing and how he hasn't like changed his form yet. He's looking at it and learning television and everything.
He can like make a bottle and then put himself in the bottle, and like he disappears into the bottle. Yeah, like as like a liquid form. Like
so creative.
Oh, the tragedy of that last wish that kept him in the bottle. The only reason why he was trapped there is because
that's what I wanted to get to. Yeah.
But
like
I love
she wished him to like, I wish I never knew you or something, right?
I wish I'd never found your bottle and I never knew you. Yeah.
And as he is disintegrating into the bottle, it's heartbreaking. And one of my favorite bits is when he pulls Albert Einstein out of the TV and is like, you want to talk to him? And Albert's just like,
no. and I really like Swinton also being like, no, that can't be good for him. Please put him back.
I like that she's just like, this is normal. This is fine.
Yeah,
like this. My life sucks. I'm just gonna accept it as it is. This is great.
I really do like the take of her as like this narratologist who studies these things. Shout out to Marvel DC getting thrown up for mythology stuff. That there's a shot where they're both on the screen. But I think she does a really good job. Putting her in that position allows her to like really play the angle of like, but without me feeling like the only comparison I can think of is like Whedon, but it doesn't feel like it's so tongue-in-cheek about how she is aware of Jinn stories and how wishing stories work and how to poke the holes in them. It feels like she is like sensibly poking at they all kind of end bad without it feeling like it's wink nudging to the audience that like, you get it, you've seen these kinds of stories before. Like it feels very in tone of the character, of the world, of the story without I feel breaking that wall.
Yeah. I love his weird elf ears. Yeah. They don't look like regular. It's weird.
I really like the idea that she wants to hear these stories to get the right wish, to like get it right. Like, is there a way that we can make a wish where it's not going to end well? And Idris Elba plays a Jinn so unlike any Jinn that we've seen, which is the Jinn who's just like, I don't like that these wishes go wrong. I would love it if you made a wish that didn't screw up everyone's life.
And that's part of it is like that building of trust, because she's like most times the wishes are from a trickster. How do I know you're not that? And like, sure, you tell good stories, but how can, and it is I think the emotional investment of the third story that is able to bring her to the connection of this is what I want. I want that. And I want that richness of care.
And it's so interesting because like a Jin's thing, it's like I am a magical being, but also like it's my like I am born to give wishes. Like that's a part of my being. So it's so interesting. That's like, hey, what's up? My name's Ryan. I'm gonna grant you a wish. Don't get crazy about it. It's just what I do. It's so weird. It's like Tilda Swinton's like, hello, sir. Tell me about your life and your wishes. And it's just like I love it. It's like it's so like nonchalant. It could have been something like, whoa, genies, and it's just like, nah, dude, she's old. She gets it. She's seen the world.
Again, like framing her as like a isolated person with an obsession with stories, so much so she is a narratologist. It is her job. Really makes it work. And the nuggets we get of her past inform on it in a good way, but her childhood, her isolated childhood with Enzo's creation, because she was very sick a lot when she was a kid. And then the story of I will forever be grateful to this film for not ever making us like do something involving the Jinn relating to either Jack or Enzo. And I do mean like both the imaginary friend Enzo or the hopeful baby that never came, Enzo. And the fact that both those story elements are there to inform on her character, but not a past that needs to be dredged up
not
for
a tragic
the story.
past.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I really like the idea of, I'd never heard of a narratologist before. I really like the idea of centering our character around that idea. Ryan, you brought up The Fall, which is a really great movie. The idea of like the important thing, you know what? This is kind of the thing that I think Hollywood likes to chase a lot when it comes to storytelling, because there you see it a lot. Hollywood loves movies about movies, right? I think what they're chasing is movies about stories, and no one really gets that right. And I think George Miller has such an imagination, such a sense of such an old world sense of storytelling that comes across in all of his films. Even the Mad Max films, like everyone talks about how Mad Max Fury Road can work as a silent film. Like the idea of like he's clearly like a begrudging narratologist himself, and which a lot of storytellers are, and he has such a passion for stories and the nature of storytelling, and this kind of felt like him putting that passion into a film finally.
If you look at like, if you were to describe this movie on the most like fundamental level, this is a movie that's about people talking about other people's stories. That's like hella boring. It's like people talking about other people. Like that sounds boring as shit. But like when you're a filmmaker with like talent and like screenwriting presence, like you know what story, you know what works in a story, so you can tell a story about storytelling.
It's very much what we were like touching on earlier, and I think Brandon made a good point with the Mad Max Fury Road silent movie. George Miller knows that film is a visual medium first, and he knows how to tell a story with the visuals, regardless of what you are hearing, what you are seeing, like being told in the actual dialogue of the film. I think that they do a great job of like, I understand the intent of every character that's on screen who is not subtitled and not speaking English in this movie.
The first story that Idris Elba tells, Shiva, right?
Shiva, yeah.
Is the best example of that, I believe, because that's the one where if you took out his narration, you could completely understand that story. Every single frame of that scene tells the story before the narration even kicks in. Even up to him watching them having sex and the guy putting the bottle down.
Yeah.
If there was no narration, I would 100% understand that Idris Elba loves this woman.
The first story, it's like
Solomon coming to Shiva, right, and who is
she chose him
partially Jinn.
Yeah,
and he loved her and ultimately feels he meant nothing to her.
Right, the musician part. Yeah.
Yes.
The only thing that the narration really needs to tell me in that sequence is that the long black leg hair implies that you're part Jinn.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, that's the only thing the narration needs to tell me. Other than that, every single frame of that scene tells me the story. And I think it's wonderful for it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that this film also provided a great opportunity for, like, it centers around Elba and Swinton, but so much diversity casting in this film, and just really wonderful actors who you don't normally get to see on screen. Really doing great jobs in these stories. They really are. And again, like, selling me the performance without me knowing what they're saying. For in a lot of cases. Sometimes they are subtitled, but sometimes they aren't. A lot of times with Zephyra, who is the last one, she is almost never subtitled. If something is explained about what she said, it's because Elba has said it, but there's a lot of sequences of her just
emoting,
speaking in a language I can't understand, but I understand exactly what she's doing. Just from her performance.
And you know, that last story is a really good example of Miller using what is essentially, like, it's the least imaginative story. And I mean that only in to say that, like, it's not the one that has the head falling off the dude and turning into a bunch of spiders and the Minotaur people. Like, right, it's the one that's not, it's really centered around one place. What? There's, like, you know, it's really centered around one place, and it's really just about this girl and how she wants to learn everything. And that's kind of what I think was missing from their love story, from Idris Elba until the Swintons' love story. That, like, that was still one of the most compelling pieces of cinematic imagery I've ever witnessed. It's my favorite. Yeah, it's my favorite. It's my favorite sequence in the movie. Is the one there. It's wonderful. Even when she almost kills the guy from having sex with him, and like and that's kind of where I feel like the Tilda Swinton and Idris Elba sequences fall flat in London, because, like, I've already seen that you can make what is essentially on paper a boring, least compelling story centered around one place very compelling and very interesting and really wonderful, and you kind of didn't later, and that was kind of the setup, having that be the last story into was probably why I checked out. Again,
honestly. I do feel like part of it is just, you know, that the story's not done, but you don't know why.
Yeah.
And even in him telling the story of Zephyra, we do know why the story is not done as we're hearing about it. It's because we know it goes bad. We know it ends with him being shut in a bottle. We know even before the story is being told that it has something to do with wishing that she had never known him. We know that is an element it is leading to. Whereas with the London story, it just feels like we don't. It really, what it is like, I don't necessarily want to say this because I feel like it's the cheap way out, but it feels like we just should have seen him degrading from the electromagnetic waves over time. And because we didn't get that, it didn't feel like there was any conflict bubbling under the thing. It just all of a sudden that thing happened too.
It almost feels like he might have rid himself into a corner, because, like, you do all of your most interesting stuff in the first part of the movie. So you get to the modern stuff where they're just having the relationship. Do you do the thing where you do have a bad ending because that's what you expect? Do you subvert that so they have a happy ending? Like, I can understand where, like, what do you do to have to satisfy this movie's ending? You know,
see, that's where I'm trying not to go. That's where I'm trying not to say that. Honestly, it felt like the London sequences were just phoned in. But, like, I don't want to go there because I know that's not who George Miller is. That's not what he does. But that's honestly kind of what it felt like to me.
Well, if you think of it as just like, well, let's just talk about the third act. Like, the A to C is her making the wish for them to be together, and the C is the electromagnetic waves are killing him. She must set him free.
Yeah.
The A to C, I think, was known by Miller. I think he knew this was her first wish, and I think he knew this was her last wish. Because of the pain it was.
It's the question marks in the middle.
It's in the middle. Something didn't come together and coalesce onto the film correctly.
Yeah.
Some element X factor there wasn't. I think he knew that first wish happened and the third wish happened. I think he knew those for sure. I think he even knew the second wish, which is that I wish you would speak to me. Because of the electromagnetic waves. I think that those things were known to him. What I think was at a loss was, what are they like in the interim? And part of what they're like in the interim is, frankly, they're at peace.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a hard element to sit in for a long time, no matter how much we want to see like people we're invested in, especially people who we want to see be together, because that's just not how stories work.
Mm-hmm.
Even if the conflict isn't between them, some conflict should exist. And that just is listing for a little while.
Do you know what I think it might be? I think because like it ends with like he comes to visit me as often as he can and he stays right. I think what I didn't like about it is it doesn't give us it's like almost like a cheap way out. It's like it gives you the yes and the no. Where like they are together but they're not together. They don't just decide on one for like an actual ending. Because I think that's what I'm feeling. Because like they're not really together,
I think,
but they're also like
I will rebuttal because I do like the ending note of him coming back and visiting. And here's the reason is because in the context of the story, her distrust of him is present from the beginning, that he could be a trickster, that he could be doing all this for his freedom. If that were still, even as she has made the wish for him to love her and be with her, that were still a true fact, she has now given him what he ultimately wanted, freedom. He gets his wish for freedom. True. If he did not love her, he would not return. So it is the fact that her faith in that is paid off by him saying, just because I'm free and it hurts, I will still come back to you. Okay. It is still that. So that 3,000 years of longing, which in some ways she gets what she wished for, right? Because she says, I want that longing. Yeah. I want that feeling of wanting to be with that person. She has that. Because now he exists in absences. He exists in that perpetual state of longing and getting and longing again. That's true. Okay. And for me, narratively, that all works. That all feeds to the story of who her character was and what she was afraid of and what she was asking for. So it doesn't feel so cheap because it's ultimately proving her fear and the faith that she put in it over her fear to be correct for the story, which for the story it was telling is beautiful. I understand how, like, I think in a lesser made film where the first part of the movie didn't tell all those elements about the two of them better, that would feel cheap. I don't think it feels cheap. I feel like it feels like exactly the right narrative choice. It's just how we got there that felt messy.
I'll give you that. All right. Yeah.
I think for me, what it really comes down to is that there's no third act payoff to the beginning of the film. And that's kind of where, like, right, this is the nature of stories and how and we talk about how the jinn aren't necessary in a world like this anymore, and that's a conversation that comes up twice in the movie. It comes up in the beginning in the lecture hall, and it comes up with Idris Elba. And in the lecture hall, she's attacked for it by a djinn or by some mystical creature. Right. And so, like, because that doesn't come back, because there's no sense of, like, even like Idris Elba being like, yeah, and the mystical creatures are all around us, but you don't see them anymore, and they're mad about that. Like, there's nothing like that. That kind of leaves me that's probably what I'm rubbing up against with the third act.
Yeah. Sure. No, yeah, I think I'm trying to figure out, because it isn't just the London stuff. Like, I wish I felt as strong as you about the end. Like, you explained it very well, and I see your point to it. But I just maybe I need to see it again to feel that for myself, because I definitely feel like once that third act hits, it's just like we don't like you said it, Brandon. Like, we don't have a conclusion to what we've been setting up.
Mm-hmm.
Not with those elements. I agree about those particular elements. I think that, like, there's messiness there. I think the Elba and Swinton story is just, I think the point of, like, where it begins and where it ends is pitch perfect. I think that's exactly like the beginning and ending you want. Some of the parts in the middle might get a little messy.
Yeah, I'll give that. Sure.
Super colorful film. I'm frankly, honestly, like, I really liked the poster when it first came out with the trailer, the one that Brandon has behind us in this main picture. I really liked it when it first came out. It had all the images of the other characters on the rims. This one does not. But now that I've seen the movie, I like this one far more, because this movie is super colorful, and that does not convey how colorful this movie is.
I've talked a lot about in this today, just about how much I love the visuals, love the imagination at play. That there's an orgy room that they put some kid in for decades.
An orgy prison.
An orgy prison.
Yeah. Oh God. Like, there's nothing grosser to me than that hand he reaches out to his brother with.
Oh God.
I really like this is because you brought up this particular story. We didn't talk about this one a lot, but I thought that story was really interesting and well done. We get a lot of the this sad sense of like, and I think it's an interesting concept of a djinn's existence when they can't be tethered or connected to the bottle anymore.
Oh yeah. He's like a
but they're
ghost
not
out there.
but they're not free. So they just kind of exist in nothingness.
Oh yeah, he's like trying to like get people's attention to
get to the bottle
place.
because he can't be. He cannot be, but yet he is.
That was a cool part. And then like the big lady smashes down on it. Yeah.
Which I thought was super well done because it didn't feel goofy.
No.
It felt humorous, of a humor of like how these stories would tell things like, and then of course,
like slapsticky.
Yes, but not in a super silly or fat phobic way.
No. They weren't making fun of anybody,
right? I really appreciated that.
Yeah.
Also, I do want to shout out that like you might not remember it super well, but Tom Holkenberg's score is super good. It's a super good, beautiful score for this movie.
Junkie XL.
Tom Holkenberg?
Tom Holkenberg. Frankly, one of the best scores I think he's ever done.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Now that I know it's him.
It's been a while.
He makes the Solomon piece, which in itself is a beautiful piece. When Solomon is wooing Sheba, but even going against that, there is a main theme for this film, and I think the main theme for this film is sad and beautiful at the same time, which is absolutely correct for what this movie is.
The entire album is on Spotify.
Yeah, and I'm grateful that this movie is not. I was definitely nervous pretty early in that this was going to be a tragedy. And I think that's the main thing is like, I just didn't want it to be a tragedy. It doesn't feel like either of the characters deserve a tragedy.
That's true.
At the end of the movie. And I'm glad that that's not the route that it decides to go.
I really like the idea that because you brought up what it feels like when they're not tethered to the bottle. I really like the idea that the final wish that gets them trapped under the ocean was really funny. It's kind of like a funny beat, but the idea of that djinn were not natively trapped in bottles. Like that's not where they're you're not going to go around and find a bunch of djinns in bottles. They specifically have to do something that gets them trapped in a bottle. Otherwise there are just djinn that are free, that are able to not have to be tied to a bottle, not have to grant wishes. But once you're trapped in that bottle, you have to grant the wishes or else you cease to exist. You kind of create this in-between path of I exist, but I don't. And all of that is part of that curse. This is part of that bottle curse that I think is pretty cool exploration in this film.
I agree. And I think it also feeds into the whole thing feeds into this narrative of because of the electromagnetic waves, because of the implication of what that means for djinn, like all magic in the world became less and less as science became more and more.
We don't need minotaurs anymore.
Right. And I like just the way that feels, that things were just kind of not hunted down, not made extinct, just kind of pushed out of the world.
It's not overly fantastical.
Yeah.
It's like, we got Ifrits and minotaurs, but don't think about it too hard.
That's what I think. You know what I would have liked to have seen? I would have liked to have seen the djinn, Idris Elba's character, could see other mystical creatures in London. People because the idea of
Fantastic Beasts.
Well, no, the idea of like because science is pushing all these people out of our eyesight, we can no longer see them. That doesn't necessarily mean they're not there anymore. And so, like the idea that Idris Elba could see them would have been an interesting aspect of the movie. That again, I'm reaching for straws to try to make the beginning pay off for me.
I see what you're saying, Brandon. I think that would be cool. I think once you open the Pandora's box of revealing everything, you have to do more. So I think leaving it tight as it is. But yeah, there could have been a scene where like, you wouldn't believe the things that I see in these eyes. And like,
that's all I'm saying. Like, what does the world look like through your eyes? And we just get a flash of maybe there's just other mystical creatures around. Maybe like a pixie flies around. I don't know. Maybe that dude, maybe that mummy Bob Cratchit dude comes back and says, "Hey, what's up?"
It's just
I remember when you were with Shiva.
Yeah, but I think that is part of the reason why that doesn't happen is because it is playing with whether it's executed well or not. That idea that Swinton is also of djinn lineage and that she can see those things and always has seen those things. Those things are less present because that's the world now.
Big like Roman looking
but she can see them, she can sense them, she can feel them.
What was with the guy in the cart at the beginning? I'm still baffled.
Yes, yeah, that's
baffled.
Yeah, I don't know.
Again, like that's what I really thought that, like, you know, they were trying to push them. I first thought that was like, oh, they're going to try and the mystical creatures are going to try and push them together.
I thought it was going to be Idris the whole time, just trying to like
the implication of the line and the energy to me of the first one in the airport feels almost like they are trying, I don't know what the purpose of this would be, but they are trying to push her away from him, not to him. But again, I'm not 100% certain of what that guy said.
We'll wait for that Blu-ray.
So, overall, I love the movie more than I dislike it by like a really wide margin. It takes big swings, and most of those big swings hit really, really hard. We just don't get movies like this very often.
Yeah.
In the sense of like what they're focusing on, how they're doing it. They're rare, and I really, really like this one. It's now pretty high up there in my George Miller filmography for sure. I think just for the visual storytelling alone, let alone, again, I can't stress enough, I think this is possibly Elba's best performance.
It's real good.
It's just so, it feels so full. I believe him in every way that he is a person who has lived through all of these things for thousands of years.
And he's like kind of reserved, but like, you know, he's spent thousands of years trapped in a bottle, and he's like, he can do so much with just like his eyes and like his tone of voice and his weird Jin accent.
The detail in his recounting of what he did at the bottom of the ocean for that first 2,500 years, where he's like, well, I spent the first 100 years playing to every god I knew, then the next 100 to every god that might exist that I didn't
whoever was listening,
and then, you know, trying to trick myself into the fact that I wanted to be in the bottle, that I was happy in the bottle, that I never wanted to come out of the bottle. It just feels very, very effective. I also really like, it's just a note on it, just when he finally does recorporealize after the giantess woman finds the bottle, and he's like, I was too desperate, I just wanted the wish. And he's like, make a wish now. I came off a little strong.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I agree with everything you're saying. Now, I don't know where I'd put this in my George Miller rankings, because I really like a lot of his movies. But
he's a good filmmaker, just is.
It's so rare to get a movie like this, and this is kind of one of those things where, like, oftentimes, like, I feel much the same way about this movie as I did like Troll Hunters, the movie, where I don't know if you guys remember that the ending of that film very much does not work, but it ruins the film retroactively. But here it doesn't. Here I like 2/3 of this movie, and the third that I don't much care for does not impact the love that I have for the first two. It is such a wonderful experience, and I was so engrossed, and I loved it so.
It's a love story that doesn't feel as conventional as love story films usually do.
Not at all. Oh yeah.
And that works in its favor and to its detriment, but it works far more in its favor.
Yeah. It's a unique love story.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. I'm just so glad that he made it, regardless of like where it whiffed.
Yeah.
It just feels so different.
We always talk, like, we're all in agreement on this podcast. Like, we'd rather have big swings than miss than being safe and not trying at all. And I would say for this movie, even like this is not just such a hard movie to make, but it's such a hard movie to market. Mm-hmm. And like, if you're not someone like George Miller, who's like a quote unquote visionary filmmaker, extreme, like no one would see this movie, right? So like the fact that he got to make a rom-com, like part fantasy drama, that's literally has no action. It's just people talking in a bed and then they're talking in the kingdom or something like that. It's an impressive movie for what it is.
This is the one for me, right? Yeah. Everything because this movie did not do well. It really crashed and burned at the box office. But it's a film that George Miller clearly had a lot of passion to make, clearly was the right person to make it, and you don't see a lot of these kind of, honestly, quite frankly, vanity projects coming from big budget filmmakers anymore. And this was definitely the film where he made Mad Max Fury Road and took all of that goodwill with Mad Max Fury Road and said, I'm going to make this weird rom-com.
And now he's currently filming Furiosa.
Exactly.
This is based off a short story called The Djinn in the Nightingale's Eye by A.S. Bayat. That's cool. Never heard
I really do like it's just a moment I wanted to highlight because I thought it was so cool. And we should bring it up is the way that his bottle got from the bottom of the ocean to the girl in the second story, which is that it was a rock that got dredged up, then put into a man's skull.
Yep.
Then taken from the man's skull and put into a wall.
Yes.
And then knocked down by her and then caved out. Really cool. Just a really cool.
I forgot about like some dude got stabbed.
And it's cool because like it exists beyond his narration. You know, we are being given something that he is not giving us because he says, I don't know. But we are being given the visual storytelling of like, well, this is how, because that's not satisfying. Like just saying like, oh, and then I was in this girl's hands. Like, I'm not going to do that to you, me, George Miller. I'm not going to do that to you, audience. Here's a really cool visual storytelling of like, it wasn't just that it was accidentally fished out of the bottom of the sea. It was actually fished out of the bottom of the sea, tossed in the sand, then thrown in a man's skull. It killed him. He sat there for a while. Someone found it, put it in a wall because it was just the right shape to go to that wall. I just thought that was such a good way of getting us all the way through those motions.
That's like a perfect like 2-page comic book. Like,
channeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You know, it's really funny. It reminds me in a really ridiculous way of what Favreau did to the tuft of hair in Lion King, how he added all this journey, that unnecessary journey that we didn't need to see in the Lion King. But when Miller did this, it was so cool and fun and unnecessary but engaging. Miller's a better filmmaker than Favreau. I said it, whatever.
Damn, there's two prequels coming out next year. Lion King and Mad Max, crazy.
Oh yeah, you've mentioned many times.
Actually, 2024.
That's fair.
You've mentioned many times, Sparkz, that you feel this is Idris Elba's best performance. I have not seen everything Idris Elba has done, but I feel pretty confident in agreeing wholeheartedly. There's something. He stands there with the weight of 3,000 years on his shoulders, and just the way he stands, the way he holds himself, the way he presents, the way he talks, the way everything about it has the weight of that 3,000 years. And I talked about how there's like this background sadness in his soul that I really feel that sadness is really there. I feel like for Idris Elba, as much as I love him in everything I've seen him in, I felt this is really the first time that I felt that he had transformed into this role. He had been so encompassed by this role. Miller really brought something truly special out of Idris Elba in this movie. And I even if this movie didn't work, I would have forever been grateful for that.
Yeah. I also have not seen Elba's entire filmography. That dude is a talented actor with a very large body of work.
And The Wire, both incredible shows.
I was going to bring up that Luther and The Wire are two shows where he's been in, where he's really expanded on a character that I haven't seen The Wire in a very long time, and I haven't seen Luther at all. So I won't say that like emphatically and objectively it is his best work, but like
this is his most unique performance.
Definitely high up there. He puts a lot into this.
Absolutely.
And I get a lot out of it.
Yeah.
It's a really good movie. I don't have much more to say. I would be just repeating points, so I will just say that I give it a 9 out of 10.
Right.
I will give it an 8.5 out of 10. Really liked it, and yeah, just like you said, Brandon, even though some of the movie doesn't work, so much of it does work that it's kind of washes over.
Yeah. It's the big swing. I'm so grateful that this big swing of a movie exists. and I'm really between an 8.5 and a 9. So I'll err on the side of excitement and say 9.
I think that's a huge testament to how good this movie actually is, that you guys started this as, I don't really like the ending, kind of hate the whole third act. 9 out of 10.
Hey, I think
that's really
that could still be true.
No, I know, and I'm saying that is a testament to how good everything else is about this movie, because you can still feel that way about an entire act of this movie.
You take off the last 25 minutes, this is a 10 out of 10,
and be like, nah, man, this movie's real good though.
Yeah, yo, it cuts off when they get together. Yeah, man, that's a perfect movie.
I was talking to I think on here she pops up as Princess Sparkle Bunny, I believe.
Yeah.
She commented when I first saw this movie, and she was like, "Oh, I hated the ending, and it made me hate the whole movie." It's like, I can't say that. I thought the first 2 acts were fantastic.
Yeah, I will definitely say, if you are a casual genre fan, if you are a casual moviegoer, this movie probably won't work for you unless you're really willing to give it the benefit, because this movie asks a lot out of you. You got to really be able to go on a journey with these 2 people just sitting on a bed in London or wherever.
Again, it's George Miller's vanity project, and we don't see big budget vanity projects anymore.
Yeah,
and it's really cool that we got one. Okay, so that'll do it.
I'll do it.
Glad we got to do this. Hell yeah.
Me too.
And then, in the immortal words of one of George Miller's most famous characters, "That'll do, pig. That'll do."
God, I live, I die, I live again.
Although I believe that's the first film, not the second one. But whatever. He did produce the first one.
Wait, you forget in the second one he says, "That'll do, pig." Still, that'll do. You forget.
Oh, you're right. James Cromwell comes back and says, "That'll do, pig." Still.
Got it, babe.
I did a list. I don't know if the list has been published. It might have, but I did a list for Screen Rant about George Miller's entire filmography.
It's not big.
It's not big at all. So it was really easy.
Yeah.
I haven't seen a lot of his earlier stuff, but man, from Babe 2 and onwards, from The Road Warrior onwards, I love every single movie I've seen of his. I love The Road Warrior. I cannot express how much I love The Road Warrior. I think Happy Feet 1 and 2 are fantastic. Babe 2 is great. I love George Miller, and I'm so glad we got this vanity project from him.
Dude's 90, still making movies. Hurry up, George. Finish Furiosa.
It was his Justice League that didn't get made, right?
Yeah.
So wish we lived in a world where I got to see that.
Bro, that movie was literally weeks from starting filming.
Yeah.
Sets were made. Costumes were out. Unbelievable.
I'd feel weird about Armie Hammer now in retrospect, but I'd still be like, man,
15 years ago, he wasn't a cannibal yet.
No, I'm saying now I would feel weird even if that movie had come out, because I probably would have really liked that movie.
Yeah, it would have ripped.
But damn, I really just the fact that storytelling would have been so exceptional.
It's so interesting. By the way, George Miller is 77, not 90. Let's not put the man
still up there.
Let's not put the man in the grave yet. The Justice League, I remember so specifically the conversations you and I had, Sparkz, about that George Miller Justice League movie. Because we were both thinking why make this movie without Christian Bale and Brandon Routh? They're there. Why are you doing this? And now looking back, I'm like, oh, you should have. You should have.
That was
you had it, George.
Yeah.
You knew the way.
I would have loved to have seen.
Honestly, it's not Nolan himself's fault, but it's those Batman movies' fault that Justice League movie didn't get.
Yeah.
Well, it's that and the Australian film industry raised their taxes, and Warner Bros. Nah, you know what? Nah, we're good.
We got a Batman coming. We can just save that money.
Yeah, I lament that film didn't happen. There was that. What was that? That was what was the guy who passed away? Who did John Schnapp? He was remember he was supposed to do a show about all the unmade superhero movies.
I talked to him about that. Now that's never going to come out.
Yeah, I would have loved to have seen that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if you hadn't guessed already, this is just kind of us vamping because the show's over. So if you're still here, why don't I plug some stuff for you? What do I plug? Okay, this is Fake Nerds. This is Fake Nerd Podcast. This is a review special for Fake Nerds Podcast. If you like this, there's more of this. There's so much more of this. There's a lot of this on YouTube. If you like this video and you subscribe to this channel, or if you're just listening to this, you can check us out on our YouTube channel. You can get all sorts of shows such as Fake Nerds. Watch She-Hulk. 2 episodes of She-Hulk are up now. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. as their own separate videos. And then we'll come back again for 5 and 6, right?
Yeah, sure.
So 5 and 6. So stay tuned for that. More Fake Nerds watches are coming. Just kind of working out scheduling. There's a lot of shows that we want to do Fake Nerds watches for you guys. For us specifically, Sandman, Star Trek Lower Decks.
Sandman.
we want to do it. I'm sure it's gonna happen.
I sure do. We got Andor starting soon.
Star Wars Andor was the other one I was thinking.
Lord of the Rings.
There's a lot of shows we want to do. So just be patient with us; they will happen. And if they don't, we will find a way to do the next season.
Yeah.
So
I think it's really messed up. A game that House of the Dragon and Lord of the Rings Rings of Power had to come out at the exact same goddamn time,
and they both rule.
That's just hard.
And they both rule. What a world.
We also have Basement Arcade, which is our video game Let's Play series. Spooktober is coming. That's what we call it, Spooktober.
One way or another.
It's happening. I'm going to make it happen.
Spooktober is coming, so stay tuned for that. Hopefully I can be home someday and we can play more Aliens Fireteam. So stay tuned.
Fireteam, Back for Blood, Dead by Daylight, Tall Poppy.
So stay tuned for a lot of that content with or without me. And Basement Arcade Pause Menu, a new episode of Basement Arcade Pause Menu has been uploaded the past couple of weeks about video games that Ben doesn't like, which are a lot of them. I didn't listen to the episode yet.
They're not.
Cool.
For a negative episode, it's not that negative.
Good. So check out that episode. That episode is up now. And of course, Animation Station and FakeNerd Book Club are also shows that you can check out on this channel. You can also find us on our mothership show. Our mothership show, guys, Fake Nerd Podcast. We go live every Sunday at various times of the day. Talk about all sorts of things. This last episode, we talked about D23, all the exciting announcements from D23, and upcoming Do Revenge, the Maya Hawke film coming to Netflix, mostly because that was the easiest one for all of us to check out this weekend.
Yeah, and then soon expect a review special just like this for The Woman King.
Whoop, whoop.
Yes. So stay tuned for all sorts of cool stuff, guys. Hey, guys, we're trying. But you know what? If you want more stuff from us, if you want us to get through all the shows and movies that we want to do, consider supporting us. Consider supporting us financially on TeePublic or Patreon, where you can find the links in the description below, or on our website at FakeNerdPodcast.com, where you can find all the links to everything.
If you just kind of like us, just give us $1 a month. We make a lot of content, and we don't really make any money.
Any money? No money.
Oh, I owe you guys $2, I think.
Hey, you know, Brandon? You can keep it on me.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. By the way, that was $2 split by 4 people. So it's like
I'm gonna buy that new 77-inch TV.
But $2 a month will be paid off by $20.89. Hell yeah!
Yeah.
All right. So that's all the things. All the links are down below. You can check them out on our Facebook page, our website at FakeNerdPodcast.com. FakeNerd Podcast on all the social medias. If you'd like to get in touch with us, FakeNerd Podcast, FakeNerdGuys@gmail.com is our email address. I'm at BT McClure on Instagram and Twitter. I mentioned that I write for Screen Rant. I do that. You can check out all my writings there, or at Atomic Geekdom, where I also write a series called Revisiting the Infinity Saga. I'm also currently writing a very stupid piece that I don't know if it's going to get published there, but we'll see. And Kaiju Ramen, which just published its latest issue of the magazine, and Kaiju Ramen Volume 1. If you were able to get Kaiju Ramen Volume 1, I got a piece in that one. It's just the same Gamera piece that was published a few issues ago, and then a new issue was published with a different piece. And then I got a couple more pieces coming in future magazines, so stay tuned. Find that at kaijuramenmedia.com. I also edit for their website. Sparkz?
If you gave me $2 a month until 2089, I would be able to afford a little over half the cost of a 77-inch TV.
Damn, so we're looking at like $21.60.
Yeah.
To pay off that, man, we better get started.
Sparkz,
where do they find you?
Oh, you can find me at Sparkz Witty on Instagram and Twitter, SPRKZ Witty.
Ryan?
You can find me giving Sparkz $1 to help pay off that TV until 2160 at DJ Tony Snark 616. Also, I am now officially back in Southern California, and I don't have a job, so I'm going to be streaming again. Whoop whoop! I can't wait to come back to Final Fantasy.
Exciting times.
Sure.
Okay, that'll do it, guys. Subscribe to us on all the things that you can find us on if you're listening to the audio. Like this video, subscribe to this channel if you're doing this on the video. And until next time we see us, stay fake nerds.